the board.
Good morning, Mr. Hunt.
Good morning. At what cost do we jeopardize the health and safety of your employees and the customers? In cutting personnel costs, TriMet is jeopardizing the health of its employees and the writing public. KGW ran a recent story of spreading airborne diseases, particularly the H1N1 virus, on board crowded MAX and trains and buses. There are even talks now about TriMet putting hand sanitizer dispensers on all vehicles. But TriMet's response to this problem was to get rid of most of the bus cleaners some 6 months ago. TriMet recently installed cards aboard 654 buses and 127 MAX vehicles, alerting the public that it's flu season and asking passengers to cover their coughs and sneezes. As a KGW viewer commented, the bus seats and handrails have got to be a one-way ticket to Germville. Another comment saying that, I'm not saying that the cleaning folks aren't doing a good job, but I'm sure they do, and I'm sure they do an awesome job. But the sheer amount of people that ride and wipe their nose and hold onto the rails and sneeze, okay, you get my point. What cleaners? Until 6 months ago, every bus and MAX train got a thorough cleaning. And once every 4 weeks. A cleaner would spend roughly 3 hours on each vehicle, cleaning the interior of the vehicles from top to bottom. That would include washing down the ceilings, walls, seat frames, floors, cleaning windows, removing gum and graffiti. The bus and rail car seats would be changed out after thoroughly being steam cleaned. That was then. But the cleaner positions were removed some 6 months ago. Now bus cleaning consists of maintenance employees opening the back windows of a vehicle and using a blower to blow everything to the front of the bus while the bus is being fueled. Often, articles such as needles and used condoms are stuck behind the seat frames. Cockroach infestations have been reported on TriMet vehicles, and when infestation was occurred or discovered, cleaners would set off bug bombs in the vehicles. In finding areas to cut costs, I think eliminating the thorough cleaning of buses and vehicles every month was a bad decision, and one that greatly affects the health of those who operate and those who ride. TriMet vehicles. Is the minimal savings by trashing vehicles clearly worth the health detriment to operators and passengers? Was this a good management decision? Does the riding public know that public transportation vehicles they commute in that are no longer subject to rigorous monthly cleaning schedules? A MAX train operator commented, "If you ever see me operate a train, you'll see me wearing brown gloves on my hands. There are many reasons why, and I have a few other operators that use these gloves. But one is definitely germs of any kind anywhere on the trains and including the cabs." TriMet needs to resume regular and thorough cleaning of its vehicles. The health of its employees who operate these vehicles and the general public that ride the vehicles is more important than savings derived from allowing vehicles to run dirty. On January 2011 board meeting, the union asked that you identify all operators from any disciplinary actions arising out of situations which implicated the Type 4 rail car problems. Because what we see as a failure on TriMet's part to recognize and address the Type 4 light rail train blind spot problems, and giving TriMet's dismissal of these concerns, the union again demands that TriMet identifies all operators from any disciplinary actions arising out of situations which implicate the Type 4 problems until such time that all issues have been satisfactorily addressed. I would like to ask TriMet, Mr. McFarland, are you prepared to issue this indemnification order at this time?
This isn't a conversation.
And finally, I would be remiss if I did not comment about the protracted labor contract dispute between TriMet and the union. I received a letter dated February 11, 2011 from Neil McFarland, which quite frankly alarmed me. Neil's letter, he wrote like he wasn't sure a what-if proposal was during mediated negotiation sessions. The following are a few excerpts from my response to Neil. You know that the parties have been in negotiations for a very long period of time. And surely you know that what-if proposals have been floated between the parties during mediation and non-mediation sessions. Maybe your claim, I don't know exactly what you mean by a what-if proposal, possibly explains why the parties have not been able to reach an agreement and settle this prolonged and protracted dispute. In his letter, Neil wrote that he recognized that you, referring to me, are writing for other audiences in addition to TriMet. In my response, I said I write to and for my membership. You, on the other hand, regularly put out information to unionized employees through your direct communication media that is most often slanted, misleading, and would not win a blue ribbon for being open and honest. Again, Neil reiterated, as he has so many times in the past, that the parties should work together to memorialize a short term, the bridge agreement that was referred to, and then attempt to negotiate a longer term agreement. The only problem with TriMet's definition of a bridge agreement seems to me that TriMet builds the bridge, the union walks over it, and before the union reaches the other side, TriMet causes the bridge to collapse. All of us should be aware that the Oregon Employment Relations Board will not proceed forward with the interest arbitration because of the pending unfair labor practice charges concerning TriMet's alleged violations of the law on several counts. First, TriMet altered its position when submitting their bargaining proposal to arbitration. Second, TriMet violated the law when it unilaterally changed the terms of the collective bargaining agreement in respect to wages and insurance. And finally, TriMet retaliated against the union, with Neil acknowledging in person that he would not have changed the contract term if the union had not filed the unfair labor practice complaint. The union has repeatedly said it is willing to resolve this agreement at any time. That TriMet is willing to reach a mutual agreement. Mutual means both sides, not just one side. As I have said time and time again, the union is ready to strike arbitrators and move immediately to binding arbitration. Once TriMet rescinds its unlawful implementation and or agrees to make its employees whole as a result of the unlawful implementation. Board member Dr. Ellen Bethany?
T. Allen Bethel.
Bethel, excuse me. In your statements, you were hoping that there was a process within the collective bargaining agreement to move these things forward under these grievances. As I mentioned last month, and I believe you've seen some written information, should have been passed on to you, is our expedited arbitration process. And although Mr. McFarland has made statements today that going to arbitration has no other cost associated, that is absolutely not true. As I stated last month, there is a court reporter that goes into those rooms. I have sat and testified with attorneys from outside counsel drilling me on issues that are paid for from TriMet. So this expedited arbitration allows both parties to come forward. We don't need a reporter. We can get a recording device like this today. And we can form and either create a mediation session and or expedited arbitration, where that could be settled that day. We have that process, sir, in place. We just need to go back to using it. And unfortunately, the association with this grievance process, there is a step one process, a pre-step. And what I'm being told from my officers, the frontline supervisors have no authority. And it started back some time ago with our previous executive director. People were concerned or scared to try to settle issues that was under Mr. Banta's regime. And that thing has carried forward that nobody is trying to settle anything. So it continues to move forward. So pre-step, let's try to get the information, let's try to resolve it. What it's turned into is let me hear all your information, we'll get back to you. I heard from an officer today that said we have a pre-grievance that's been out there for over a year. We continue to talk about spending money and issues out there. One should say that labor relations is an extremely important piece of this organization. And it's unfortunate that even though every month I put forward, somebody in my staff has put forward, to be on your agenda to speak about these important issues. I've been told I'm limited to 3 minutes, and I appreciate the board chair allowing me the time to talk today over that 3 minutes. Wouldn't it be prudent to allow me to have some time to speak on the issues? Why would we say the president of this organization, I'm not the general public, I'm speaking for a large group of people. To deny me the right to come forward and speak on those issues is not responsible. And I understand that at times, maybe my conversation should be at the beginning of the day versus the end of the day. And I understand those things can be heated at times, and I mean no disrespect to all of you. And Steve, I appreciate your assistance and that message out there that you don't get paid for doing this. And as somebody that chairs a lot of meetings, I've been on the other side, the receiving end of people that aren't necessarily telling me things. But I can tell you I've never got up and left them. And I've never not let people speak on it. Because passionate people get things done. And as I close, and I'm finishing up, today we're talking about, and Mr. McFarland noted, that there's going to be snow that could potentially coming on. If you read our collective bargaining agreement, that has now been expired for quite some time, in the back of it, you'll see a provision that refers to an emergency situation. To this day, many years later, TriMet has been unsuccessful to come to the table and negotiate that. What that means is when people say it's time for me to go home, they go home. We don't have an emergency situation agreement in place that makes this system run. So although Mr. McFarland has articulated that it runs 24/7, he has not recognized the importance of sitting down and having a good labor agreement. We don't want this system not to run. We are proud to be number one. But if we continue to not listen to each other, if we continue to not have good dialogue and an opportunity to sit down, and I appreciate again, Steve, looking at different forums. I have asked all of you to join me in those negotiations. And to this date, none of you have joined me. To this date, none of you have responded to anything I've sent to you with the exception of Mr. Larenbach. So I'm having a problem when I don't have the ability to make good contact with you. And in this forum that sometimes it is abruptly left even though I'm trying to finish my thought. And again, I appreciate all of your assistance. But it's important to recognize, as Mr. Larenbach pointed out today, it takes both sides. So the notion of somehow taking what stopped going to arbitration to put that to the side, I don't believe is going to happen. And unfortunately, we've said all along, unfair labor practices, move today. We sit down today, we try to figure it out. We can't do that, we both sign an agreement saying we immediately go to expedited arbitration. We allow the third party to make a decision. That's what the process is supposed to be about. But everybody continues to forget what we gave up. We gave up the right to strike. We gave up the right to withhold service, to maintain our benefits until we get there. We're already saying we'll go tomorrow. We would go tomorrow. The only thing that needs to happen is that we rescind what's going on. And unfortunately, Mr. McFarland did not articulate properly of all of our retirees and the problems that are associated. We currently have people today that are having major problems with their health insurance. Because we all know, every time you switch something or change it, it gets all crazy. And we've got a lot of hard people, good people working on these issues. But at the end of the day, it's going to take good communications. I'm finishing. There currently, and I'll repeat it again, there is currently not a labor relations director. There is not anybody currently that's in charge to say, you know what, go talk to John. I don't want him at the next board meeting. I want this issue resolved. It's clear the current administration does not recognize that importance. So I encourage all of you to help Mr. McFarland and everybody else saying, let's figure out a better way to do this. I am more than willing to sit down and negotiate a contract. I'm more than willing to sit down and work on issues. What I'm not going to do is have it shoved down my throat. What I'm not going to do is say, you know what, John, you agreed to this part, but we're not agreeing to this part. Yeah, let's settle this tiny contract. Let's say, yeah, you're going to pay all your health insurance, and then let's take another bite of the apple. So one apple, you cut it in half. That's what happened when you took away my health insurance and my wage increases, which, by the way, we wouldn't have gotten in December, so there was no savings there. Now you want to take it to a third party to make the decision to cut the apple again. Why would that be in my best interest or our membership's best interest? What our best interest to do is recognizing it does take all of us collectively working together. And we can't do that either side with somebody saying, hey, there's something in front of you. That doesn't work. And as it was mentioned earlier, when we end up in arbitration, if we don't do this properly, and I believe it was Mr. Larenbeck that mentioned it, what you're going to have is one side, either side, not appreciating what took place, but a third party making it. And if you think that's how labor relations is going to get better, it's not. With that, I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to appear in front of you, and I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thanks, John. That was, by the way, about 15 or 20 minutes, but well said. So, we're going to move on at this point.
Yeah, not a question, Mr. Chairman, but I think that...
Board Member Lara.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And not a question of you, John, but an grievance procedure must move on. But Neil, I think we're going to give Neil an opportunity. That was a pretty scary statement about the cleaning of the buses, and I think you should respond. We don't want the public to think that we're not cleaning them. That was a scary statement there.
I would say, first of all, that it was clear that the last 2 years, TriMet has made a lot of budget decisions that we didn't want to make. And to some extent, the question is not about the number of employees, because frankly, what we try to do is preserve service on the street to the maximum extent possible. I would say that over the next year, within this next budget process, the questions that are raised, I think, are reasonable to come back before the board to say, is this a place where we need to, if you will, the pendulum may have swung too far and we need to go back. So I think it's a valid topic for conversation and a valid topic for us to investigate as we put the budget together for the next year. I would say that there is still a very substantial cleaning force within TriMet. It is not the people dedicated to the scrubbing of the buses on a monthly basis the same way, but anytime there's any kind of a hazard or cleanliness issue identified with the bus, then a cleaner is assigned to fix it. And I might ask to see if Shelley Lomax was here, if she had anything else that she wanted to add that's related to that.
I just say that each night a maintenance employee is responsible for, as John described, blowing out, using what we call a cyclone to blow out debris. They use an air wand to go ahead and get anything else, and they do the best they can to get clean inside. They look, if they notice spills, coffee, pop, things sticking to the ground, they use a mop and a broom to clean that. If there's any kind of a biohazard that's reported, then they take care of that. We call it a shagger. A maintenance physician is responsible for wiping down the steering wheel of the bus operator compartment every night. To the issue of the stanchion bars related to H1N1 and the spread of flu viruses, quite frankly, we've looked at this issue along with other transit agencies across the nation during the height of the swine flu scare when it first arose a couple of years ago. What we found was that you can wipe down the stanchion bars, but because of the way the virus lives on the hands, the moment that someone touches that stanchion bar, it's reinfected. So it really does become incumbent upon each and every one of us to be traveling movie theaters or on public transit to be responsible for our own little Purell wipes and not touch our eyes, nose, and mouth. And that's what that message is, of cover your cough. And that's a little more than you wanted, but there you have it.
Yeah, we don't want to skip.
Thank you.